Hello everyone, this is PK Entertainment and we are back again and more boxing now, and we're going to focus on the recently announced fight between WBC mandatory challenger Dillian Whyte and established Russian heavyweight Alexander Povetkin. And this fight is going to take place on May the 2nd at the Manchester Arena, and I believe it's on Sky Sports box office. Now, quick thoughts on the fight. This isn't really a fight I don't believe many people are asking for. It certainly wasn't one that I were asking for. It is a very competitive fight. You know, Povetkin, he is a tough, very well established boxer. He has on his record, he has 38 fights, he's got 35 wins, he's got 2 losses and 1 draw, and respectively the 2 losses were against both to Vladimir Klitschko and Anthony Joshua, and both fights were for undisputed or the majority of the heavyweight belts at the time. He lost to Klitschko in 2013 and he lost to Joshua later on in 2018. Despite being 40 years old, Povetkin, you know, he is a tough competitor. He's been around the block. He's well experienced. This is a very tough fight for Dillian Whyte, and the reason I say it's a tough fight because I'm concerned, especially about the recent fight that Dillian Whyte had against Thomas Whack at the Saudi Arabia Joshua Ruiz rematch. And if you look at that fight in particular, Dillian Whyte was very overweight, he was very sluggish. We all know he's been out in the ring for a long time. He was very really just looked unfocused and just looked unconditioned. And I actually think Thomas Whack had opportunities in that fight to stop Dillian Whyte. So if Thomas Whack can do that, then you better believe Alex Povetkin can really cause a lot of trouble to Dillian Whyte. Now, we all know the reason for Dillian Whyte's long layoff. It was the supposedly failed drug test at the time with UCAD, the whole leaked news of him failing an initial drugs test due to adverse findings, and they still carried on with the fight against Oscar Rivas. If you remember, the hearing, if you like, was on the day of the fight that he was due to fight Oscar Rivas. The fight still went ahead. The news was leaked later on through an American journalist, Thomas Hauser, who leaked the news that Dillian Whyte failed an initial test for adverse findings. We were waiting for the B sample. I still to this day don't think the results of the B sample have come into play, but UCAD released a statement later on stating that he was cleared to fight. There was small traces of metabolites which are more than likely due to contamination. Now, I'm not going to go into that whole issue. The story and the statement for me still was very shaky. I wasn't convinced by the explanation of the story or how the events unfolded. There was all this talking points about loaded gloves as well, and how Oscar Rivas' team, they weren't informed of the hearing that Dillian Whyte had with the UCAD board over the adverse findings. So it's all very, let's say, unconvincing, let's put it that way. But we've moved on from that now. There's no point in delving into that. If you go onto YouTube or Wikipedia, you can find all the details about how those events unfolded. We have to move on. We know boxing, all these things happen all the time, so we have to just accept it for what it is. Unfortunately, you know, I have my own thoughts about it. You know, we need a whole reset, I think, in terms of the testing and how the sport is governed in particular, but well, that's for another day. But we move on now. Dillian Whyte's ready to fight. Like I said, there's no belt on the line, there's no kind of mandatory shot on the line. He's still in this position where he's mandatory for the WBC. In case you didn't know, WBC had suspended him following these drug allegations, and they stated that he wouldn't get any kind of mandatory shot until 2021. So you can make of that what you will. Again, I'm just going to focus on this fight in particular, which again is a very 50-50 competitive fight. Yes, it's very tough. Yes, I'm probably going to lean towards Povetkin actually, which may surprise a lot of people. I just think Povetkin is a lot more sharper in condition. He's a lot more ring ready, ring rough. He's a lot more tried and trusted in terms of his match competitiveness. And again, I'm just going off that performance recently of Dillian Whyte against Thomas Whack. And if you go further back, if you look at his fights against Oscar Rivas, he did get knocked down. I believe it was in the 9th round he got knocked down. Again, looked very shaky there. You know, Oscar Rivas Could have actually pulled that win out the bag had he just asserted himself a bit more. We go back to his Parker fight, as we know, which was essentially a do or die. He gets knocked down, Dillian Whyte. What was it? 30 seconds to a minute left in the 12th round. He got back up and was really on his last legs, surviving. And he got to the end and he managed to pull off the points win. We go even further back against 2 fights against Chisora. And I had Chisora winning both fights. I know Dillian Whyte scores a knockout. I think it was in the 11th round, the 10th or the 11th round against Chisora in the second fight. Chisora had a couple of points deducted, I think unfairly. But I had Chisora winning before the knockout. The first fight, Dillian Whyte scores a points decision. And again, I thought Chisora had won that fight. There was a instant, if you look at in the 12th round, where Chisora throws a great right hand and Dillian Whyte is kind of almost does his 360. And, it technically was a knockdown and the kind of ref stepped in there. Many people thought he saved Dillian Whyte from the knockout. If you actually watch the footage, you'll see Chisora's management jumping up and down at that time. The referee shouldn't have jumped in at that moment where he scored that right hand on there. So the first and second fights, I thought Dillian Whyte lost to Chisora before he scored a knockdown in the second fight. So he's a tough competitor, Dillian Whyte, yes, and I can understand why he is a pay-per-view attraction, because he has been in tough, exciting fights, which is partly of what you want. He's a very outspoken personality. He's had the whole history of Joshua. So I can understand why they've really established him as a pay-per-view name now, because if we look at it really outside of Joshua and Dillian Whyte, Matchroom, Sky, they don't really have pay-per-view attractions, pay-per-view names. So every fight now Dillian Whyte has is due on pay-per-view. I don't think this is a pay-per-view fight. Again, like I said, there's no belt on the line. If Dillian Whyte wins, it doesn't make him all of a sudden this essential contender for all the belts, right? Joshua has beaten Povetkin in the past, like I said. Vladimir Klitschko has beaten Povetkin in the past. So, but this is what it is now. Dillian Whyte is established pay-per-view fighter, so they put this one on there. So again, I would probably lean towards Povetkin. If it's anything it's going to tell, it may be Povetkin's age. He is 40 years old now, so that's going to take his toll. Me personally, I would actually see a rematch against Michael Hunter. If you didn't watch the undercard for the Ruiz Joshua rematch event, Povetkin had a great kind of back and forth, toe to toe encounter with Michael Hunter, and that was the best fight on the undercard. I mean, I think that probably saved the undercard. It wasn't very good prior to that fight, and we all know that Joshua Ruiz fight was very much a one-sided affair. But the fight against Hunter was a real kind of toe-to-toe, back and forth. It was a draw in the end. Many people had Michael Hunter winning that fight. I probably saw it as a draw. I think Povetkin had the upper hand in the early rounds, and then Michael Hunter really asserted himself more in the later rounds. Again, this could be down to Povetkin's age, and his stamina and his endurance isn't going to be what they were when he was younger. So I would probably see a rematch there. We all know as well, anyone that doesn't, that a while back Povetkin was due to fight Deontay Wilder. When Wilder had the WBC, and Wilder was actually going to go to Russia to fight because they won the purse bid, and that was going to be Wilder's biggest payday. I think he was going to receive something like $4 million at the time. But Povetkin had failed a drug test for meldonium, and at the time there was this outbreak of Russian athletes getting punished for the use of meldonium at the time. Sharapova, the tennis star, I've done a video covering that. She got pulled forward for failing the drug test for using this meldonium substance as well. So that's just a bit more history into Povetkin. Both of these fighters, ironically, do have a checkered past in terms of drugs and failed tests. But again, I don't think that's going to take away from what's going to be a very competitive 50-50 fight. I'm probably going to say Povetkin, maybe 7th or 8th round stoppage. Okay? Now, Dillian Whyte could put out the fight. Like I said, he's very tough. He does hit hard. And being in these tough fights that I've mentioned before does mean that he is used to coming on in the later rounds and being involved in these tough fights, which can be good for a boxer. It means you can never count them out when the fight goes late on. But I just think Povetkin, he's experienced, he does hit hard, and he has been in very many tough encounters himself, and I just think he's going to start off really well actually. Dillian Whyte will come back and resist, and I just think Povetkin will start catching Dillian Whyte, especially to the body. And again, I think Dillian Whyte's lack of conditioning following how long he's been out the ring for will tell in the end, and I think Povetkin is probably going to stop him in the 8th round. I could be wrong. Dillian Whyte could put it out the fight, and then we could have another late stoppage like we did with Parker, like we did with Chisora. It's very possible that Dillian Whyte can pull off that kind of victory on there. But I'm going for Povetkin this one in the 8th round stoppage on here. So let me know what you think in the comments below. Are you excited for this fight? Is this fight you're not really that bothered about? You think it shouldn't be on pay-per-view? Do you think there's bigger kind of fights to be worrying about within the heavyweight division? Let me know what you think in the comments below. But those are my thoughts on now on Dillian Whyte versus Alexander Povetkin. Let me know what you think, and I will give you more coverage of boxing fights as they're announced. I know we've got Usyk and Chisora potentially to be announced very soon as well, so I will give my thoughts on that. So that's my thoughts for now. Take care of yourselves, and I will see you very soon.